especially when Michael would do stuff like shut down Disneyland so we could hang out as a band. I mean, who does that, right? Who could get away with doing that besides Elvis?
What's going on, everybody? I'm Dan Ray, and this is Cover Band Confidential. This week, we continue our interview series with legendary hired gun guitar player Jennifer Batten. The conversation you're about to watch is about how she approached the material when playing with Michael Jackson and what touring's like when you're backing up the biggest pop star on the planet. If you like this clip, please go back to last week's interview and feel free to check out the full interview with Jennifer Batten on episode 145 of the Cover Band Confidential podcast. Links are in the notes below. Also, if you haven't already, please go ahead and like and subscribe to our channel. We post new videos here every Friday, and our podcast is closing in on 150 episodes. Both are designed for the musician looking to up their game and to run their bands like a business. With that out of the way, let's get into it. One of the defining moments in my experience as being an audience member of yours was the Michael Jackson work you did. And I went back and reviewed some of that, including the great video of you doing the Beat It solo. And what jumps out of the screen about that is how much you completely nail Eddie's solo. I mean, note for note, nail it with some flourish. Like there's a little zhuzh you put on it. I just want to note that. And then my understanding of Michael's process was that it was very controlled. So I wondered how much like freedom you had to do that, how much you got to play with the material, how much make it your own you had access to with him.
I was probably the luckiest one in the band. I mean, it depends on which tour, because we played different tunes and there was different forums for different tours. But for instance, on Working Day and Night, I got to improvise. And I was the only one in the band that got to improvise. Because in the world of pop, especially pop that has sold 10, 20, 30, 40 million copies. In the 80s, you couldn't walk in any venue without hearing Billie Jean or Beat It, you know? So at that level, the audience, without even knowing it, they know the EQ of the snare. It's just ingrained. But the repetition of hearing that over and over and over and over, there was a lot of effort in trying to recreate the tones, even in the drums. Ricky Lawson played acoustic drum kit, but he had triggers, and he had as big a rack of gear than the keyboard players had because of all the stuff he was triggering, because those snares on some of the stuff, especially in Dangerous, that it was layered. Some of it sounded like a ping pong ball layered with this kind of snare, and just they had a ridiculous number of tracks they were working with. Michael wanted to hear it like the record. He spent so many hours on all of this stuff, getting it to sound like he wanted. Of course, he's going to want to hear the same thing live, and the audience is going to want to hear the same thing live. And you would look out at the audience, and they were all singing his songs. They all knew every lick of every song. And it's something like that. It's super, super important to get everything exact. And then if he wants to change stuff, if he wants to pop in a spot for an open improv, great. That's just icing on the cake.
We've always kind of said, in response to the sometimes snobbery of original bands about how cover artists are not really it, look, somebody who's touring with Michael, they're doing the same process as a cover band is. Their job is to figure out the part exactly the way it is, make it sound exactly the way it is. It's the same process, the same thing. Essentially, that's a cover artist. Essentially.
I know. I wasn't aware of the snobbery really until recently. It is the same thing, but it is looked down upon by certain people, like a cover band. I did that. Tribute bands, that's not the real thing. It is what it is. Every genre has its thing, and the only difference between a cover band and playing with Michael Jackson is all the songs are by the same artist. I didn't write it. I didn't write a lick of that stuff. It was all done before I even jumped in the rehearsal hall.
Yeah, and we have a ton of respect, obviously, for original artists, including you have 3 albums of originals, right, that are great.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's all. If there weren't original artists, we'd have nothing to play as cover artists. So, okay. Yeah.
You got a point.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
It is something that is impressive because there's a part of your work that is, there's a mimicry. I mean, and you've got to cop a lot of really great players, Steve Lukather and Eddie Van Halen, like all of these really top-notch musicians. But then there's also you, and you're in there. And when you watch the videos and you listen to the performances, like, it's still you, even in the replication, I guess. I think every player's got their little thumbprint that they put on, their performances and stuff. And
maybe unavoidably, right?
There's so many nuances in every player's playing, and especially with guitar. It's one thing if you got 10 guys going up and playing a piece of music on acoustic piano, and you're blindfolded, there's not going to be a huge amount of difference between them. I mean, the timing, of course, is personal, and the attack, the pressure that you do. But with guitar, I mean, which string are you going to play that E on? Because all the strings, all the positions sound different. Where are you going to pick it on the string? Closer to the bridge, closer to the neck? And, a million other nuances is part of the personal sound. It was 1 month where the band was in one room by ourselves, singers were in another room, and dancers in another. To get down, we're given cassettes of the Victory Tour, so we could hear the tempos and the forms, because the forms were different for dancing. The second month was in a giant production stage with the special effects and the pyro and everything else that went along with the show. And we didn't even meet Michael until the second month, which was kind of cool. You know, it's pretty nerve-wracking to play for the biggest star on Earth ever in the history of ever. So to bond as a band first and then get the stuff nailed before we even meet him. And in fact, when we did meet him, we knew he was coming in that day, and we were playing, and we had heard that if he was happy with the music, he'd start dancing, and he started dancing right away. So with Greg Fillinganes at the helm, you can't go wrong. I mean, it doesn't get funkier than that. And Ricky Lawson, it was just a wonderful band.
So I don't want to necessarily dwell on that whole part of your experience, but what was that like? What was it like being a female musician in a male-dominated situation where, you are as competent and as capable as the people that you were working with? What was that like, and has that situation evolved at all since then?
I have to say everyone in that band had respect for everybody else. And so I was just one of the guys. There wasn't anything I can recall that stood out, that separated me. I was just there to do my job. And I was also lucky because the other guitar player, John Clark, that was in the band, he was a rookie as well as far as the big tours. And so we kind of commiserated with each other, like, how the hell did we get here? Jesus Christ, this is huge, Especially when Michael would do stuff like shut down Disneyland so we could hang out as a band. I mean, who does that, right? Who could get away with doing that besides Elvis? But yeah, I mean, we still, a couple of the people have passed away, but the people that are still alive, we kept in touch all these years.
What is a tour experience like at that level? You got the gig, you did the rehearsals, you got on a plane, and you were just gone for, year and a half, 2 years. And then, you did that for the next decade, basically. What is that experience like? Physically, emotionally, mentally? What is it? How does that work?
I will say there's a whole lot of different levels. And that was the top level, which meant we'd fly business class, we'd get the best hotels. We didn't have to touch our luggage as long as it was packed and outside our doors. It would just magically appear at the next hotel or inside the next hotel. We traveled overnight by bus, so we would already be in the next city when we woke up. He had reached a point of fame that he didn't have to work every day. We had 100 people in the entourage, so to pay 100 people and keep us going, at that time, his manager said cost $500,000 a week. That's just the bottom line. Yeah. He spent $1 million on clothing. Michael had a belt that was carved silver of different eras of his life. That was $30,000. And for instance, when Thriller hit 10 million copies, all the Sonys shut down and went to Hawaii to party. So there was some money flowing. That was the first time I ever had Dom Perignon. It was real easy to get used to. I've been on that tour, and I've been since then. Actually, one of the last tours I did, in America anyway, was with Uli John Roth and Andy Timmons. And that was sleep on a bus. There's really no organization. When the bus stops, you got to figure out how to feed yourself. I've seen both sides of it, and obviously I prefer the upper side. And touring with Jeff Beck was wonderful too. It was, instead of 100 people, there was 12. There was a bus of roadies and a management and band in a different bus that would have obviously different schedules. And that was more like a family, where we would eat together and party together. And that was a really, really fun, enlightening time. But travel, I mean, at any level, travel can suck. The jet lag doesn't change. Flying from here to Japan, you're not going to feel good when you land. It's just no getting past that.
Well, and you've kept that travel schedule up even up until recently, doing the clinics and your solo work. So, I mean, there's got to be a part of it that you do enjoy, but I can understand how, at some point, it's just enough's enough.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, it depends on the balance, how many months you're home, how many months you're on the road, but it can be very unhealthy, mentally and physically. A lot of people suffer big time, and a lot of us die young because of things we can't control. I mean, there is unavoidable stress in travel. That's part of why I'm not so keen to do it anymore. I wouldn't mind going out for a festival here and there and maybe being out for a week, but 6 weeks, no thanks.
Yeah, I think this past year has been a real eye-opener for all of us, really.
Yes.
I think for some of us, it's given us an opportunity to kind of refocus and reprioritize. But I think for a lot of people, they're just like, I think I'm good. I've done this for this long and kind of like being home. I kind of like not having to, work every weekend. I started getting into this work because I was doing the same thing, at a much lower level. I was, we were in vans and sleeping on floors and stuff, but it was like, it's time to stay home and, do family stuff and that kind of thing. So, I totally get it.
Yeah. Well, my first tour ever was with an Elvis impersonator in the South Pacific. And I fell in love with touring because I hadn't left the country except for Mexico, right? And to be in the South Pacific and have these rabid fans and be on this exotic island and discover another way to live. Like, they didn't wear shoes. Most of the houses didn't have walls. It was like thatched sides. It would rain for 30 minutes a day at the same time of day. And I just fell in love with the idea of discovering new places and new cultures. I'm very lucky. I mean, I'm bitching about it, but I'm very lucky that what a wonderful way to see the world. Get paid for it and play music.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, don't forget to like and subscribe. We just released a ton of new merch on our site. You can get these designs and a bunch of others by going to our merch store via the link in the description. Have an awesome week, and we will see you next time.